Yay Networks.
I just need to make sure that the
Guys, this is Big Daddy Garrett for anyone who doesn't know.
Is that right? It's a tip in, just the tip in my mouth.
Whoa, now.
This is a doctor podcast.
We would
Brandon.
never talk about sex or sexual things or say bad words
This is for grown-ups
or say shit.
and
Like, never.
professionals.
Yeah. I do love that is a part of our brand. It's probably one of my favorite things.
That was funny.
Sex.
Yeah.
It still exists. They didn't hear it, but we did.
Yeah.
I don't like doing that. You have that whole moment.
So much energy. Drum roll.
Which we could eventually just get it to a place where it's like we have something and then you just start talking, because I feel like that's more of what you like anyway.
Uh-huh.
Like we have a set.
I'm still
Thing.
drum rolling.
What are we?
I'm
rolling?
waiting for you.
Rolling?
I'm drum rolling you in.
Rolling. Leave all this in. Leave all this. The drums are still going.
I'm impressed with my consistency. It's about to get off.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of You Crack Me Up. Soon to not be You Crack Me Up anymore. We're gonna change it.
Let's just surprise them.
That's not gonna be the name. You'll probably figure out what the name is.
Or you'll hear it and you'll be like, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, if you watch the podcast, go comment on one of our most recent social media posts and tell us what you think the new name is going to be.
Oh,
If we were better about our actual podcast social media itself, which we'll get there eventually, we could have that as a post up on our actual page and you could go there. But I'm not saying that we're at that level yet, so we'll get there eventually. But we're going to change some things. We're not going to change, but the name of the show is going to change just to fit more of what we talk about and consistently kind of dive into on this.
We're still going to crack you up, so don't worry. And if not you, then each other.
All the time. I thought for sure he was going to drop a soundbite in. I think we need more than just my soundbite, by the way. We need some.
Maybe
there's
we'll
plenty
pick
of
one up.
Alex-isms that we could have in here.
I thought about that.
Yeah, I was like, I literally paused because I was like, I know it's coming. I'm like, I know he's going to. He's going to drop this in here. If you're new, welcome. We're so glad you're here.
Well, I'm definitely so happy you're here.
What are we talking about?
Today, we're talking about anxiety.
You look so proper. You're cracking.
Do I look like I'm in school? What do you think? Yeah.
If you guys aren't watching this on video and you're just listening, it's funny. I'll paint you a word picture. Alex looks like a school teacher. Alex looks like a school teacher that she's like, man, we're back in school and we're at our first thing and everyone's kind of excited, but we're hanging out. And she's like, I take this very seriously.
I love the first day of school. In fact,
the first day of school was so fun.
Was fun.
And then it just turned.
Some people get anxiety on the first day of school. Good segue. Here we go.
Probably do. What are we talking about today?
Anxiety.
Oh yeah, did we already talk about that?
Anxiety is an alarm.
Yes, specifically. So that topic of anxiety is an alarm to change. I think what people's perspective is on anxiety. Dr. Sarah, who works with me, that's actually what she likes to specialize in. She helps a lot of patients. I know for you probably see it all the time too. Patients come in, they fill out paperwork, they, share with us what's going on. Hey, what's your chief complaint? What's the thing that's going on? For me, a lot of times, obviously, it's migraine. But as you get into like check off things within your general history, we have a little section on our paperwork that says anxiety, depression. And I can't tell you how many times I just see those little marks checked on there as well. We just recently had a couple of patients who started that they're like, they had reached out to Sarah because they were having anxiety and they're like, well, I also get migraines too. And Sarah and I were having the conversation of like, well, how do I make sure that I'm like addressing and helping them to understand that those are related without like, oh yeah, we just help everyone with everything. And I was like, we're not saying everyone and everything in that sentence. You were talking about the fact that anxiety and migraine are more commonly an issue of the nervous system, which is why they're reaching out to you. And that's what we want to be able to work on. But I've been doing a little bit more research. I've found some pages on Instagram. Like I'm going to give a shout out to this page called The Anxiety MD. I think you guys should check him out. I love that he has a different approach than most medical doctors when it comes to how you look at anxiety. That's actually where I got the title of this episode. Was he talks about anxiety is literally just an alarm that is going on inside of your body. It's a way that we are designed and developed over time. It's actually something that is good for us. But when we leave the alarm on for too long, when we've ignored the fire alarm that's going on, or we've just constantly left it in a state of like, oh, I'm just so used to that going on all the time. It's like you forget. It's like becoming nose blind. How many times have you like, oh, we cooked some Brussels sprouts in the house, smelled it at first, forgot about the smell, then, hey, let's go for a walk. And you come back and you're like, wow, the house smells like a Brussels fart inside of here.
Ew.
You know,
I really like. Other
That
than
needs-
the Brussels
you need
sprout
to grab that
farts,
sound.
I
Ew.
really love. I really love how we're painting this picture as anxiety is an alarm, because I want to run through some quick statistics that
Okay.
I found that I thought were really interesting for this discussion, especially because you specifically mentioned anxiety and migraine overlap.
Mhm.
And would you agree that migraine affects more women than men?
Yes.
And
It's
not only
statistically-
anecdotally in your office, but statistically, migraine sufferers are mostly women.
I think it's like
Right?
50% more. I think it's like the stats are like 1 in 4 women have migraine and like 1 in like 12 men or something like that.
Right.
I know I have those stats somewhere, but yes.
But regardless, more women
way
for sure,
more.
right? Okay, so interestingly enough, what I was looking at, where did I find these? The American Anxiety and Depression Association.
Mhm.
So almost 20% of our population, 18 and older, deals with anxiety in some
Mhm.
form, which is crazy. It's a fifth of our population is diagnosed with some sort of anxiety, right? And the other thing that I thought was interesting to illustrate this was anxiety is kind of a spectrum, where I think today it's really popular to say like, oh my God, I'm dealing with so much anxiety, when really you're just dealing with stress,
Yep.
right? But then there's this other end of the spectrum that is really impacted, and we're dealing with panic disorders. We're dealing with phobias. We're dealing with obsessive compulsive behavior. We can't leave our house, or we wash our hands 50 times a day, or whatever the case, right? Like it's severely impacting our quality of life. And to bring it back to the statistics, for generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, social anxiety disorder, specific phobias, and obsessive compulsive disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
women are 2 to 5 times more likely to be diagnosed than men in all of those. And I just find that so interesting, because I think it really lends itself, and we can chat about this because I'm curious your thoughts, but really lends itself to this idea that clearly stress impacts women in a very different way than it impacts men.
Mhm.
Because I'm not saying men don't deal with anxiety. For sure they do, right? But for whatever reason,
Yeah, we've talked
they're-
about my story about it.
yeah, like their physiology, men's physiology, or oftentimes men's practices, right? Like
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, they deal with it in a different way than women, or maybe they just deal with it somehow. They get out that energy or whatever. Whereas women, I think we take a whole lot on, and it takes a lot. We have a big capacity for tolerance.
Yeah.
And until, like we're talking about, anxiety is an alarm, right? Until that alarm gets so loud, it shows up in these really intense ways where we are forced to take a medication, or we're forced to go see this person or go do this or whatever, because we can't, where it's gotten out of control.
Well, you're feeling something that nobody can see. So nobody knows what it is that you're actually experiencing except for you inside of your body. Like,
Invisible illness. That's
yeah.
why we call it invisible illness.
go back to the episode, and I can like get into it a little bit. I'm sure we will. Like we don't want to tangent here, but with my story and like what I dealt with, it definitely massively changed my perspective when talking about anxiety. Because I think the popular thing on social media is we have 2 camps, because it's interesting that you talk about how women are affected and how men are affected.
Mhm.
I think women tend to do a slightly better job because I think they tend to powwow about the subject. They tend to
There's
try
more
to
community and vulnerability.
they try to
and
have that, like, you find the little places and the
I'm gonna go have
people,
girls' night and we're gonna
yeah,
talk about our feelings.
like we're going to connect with other, and you're more willing to talk about that and discuss like
There's
the
more of a
emotional,
culture for that.
and what it feels for you. And I think on the men's side, it's the guys that are like, quit being a little bitch, just, quit making excuses, go do it. Like, that was my experience in watching this, is like, if you're doing that, you need to quit. Like,
I just had a thought.
what?
Do you think women, it shows up this way in women? Men deal with things like porn addiction,
Mhm.
addictions in general,
Yeah.
gambling addictions, cheating, quick dopamine hits
Mhm.
where we check out, we play video games, men shield themselves off from
Yep.
vulnerability. They take everything on the weight of the world on their shoulders because it's weakness. So we almost slip into like a free state or like a depressive state, and then we get really quick dopamine hits.
So I usually call it escapism.
Mhm.
When I went through my stuff, I started just meeting with more, like, I decided to go at it, and I wanted more people to know what I was going through than trying to hide from it. So
I would say though that specifically lends itself to how much work you've done
oh yeah, it's
for you to lean into that.
yeah, you have to. It's one of
Right.
those of like, it crippled me in such a way that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to. It's how my brain works with anything. My wife always jokes about this. You know this because you've known me forever. If I get into something, I will know every single possible thing that I can know about it. I'll know all about the community within
We're
it
both-
and the culture.
yes,
Yeah,
mhm.
like I will.
We'll go down the rabbit holes.
I will go
all of them.
deep down a rabbit hole on something. So I've done that in, my coach that I talked about, and I working with Brian to be able to unpeel the things of like what got me to this place, what got me here, but also just having a community of men that knew what it was that I was going through. And my pastor for me was one of those important ones. And you got to realize he's the guy that a lot of people talk to about that. And he goes, you have to realize he, we met multiple times and talked, but he was like, I was validated in the fact that he was like, I'm glad that you've approached this in this way, because this is a lot of time for men when they start getting into what you're talking about. They have these escapism things that they just default or go back to of drinking more, playing golf more, getting away more. Like they just want it's their way of removing themselves from the situation so that I don't have to sit in or deal with or feel whatever it is that's making me feel the way that I'm feeling. We are masters of escaping from that and disassociating and removing ourselves from it. But like you and I were talking about, it's is it a quirk or is it trauma episode that we did? It's the exact same thing. It's
Right.
these ways that we've
It's coping.
programmed. It's our coping mechanisms that we've developed over time. And the problem is we don't realize that came through relationships that you had, or your relationship with your parents, or the relationship that you had with your siblings. And so I think there's
how emotional regulation was modeled for you.
yeah, I think there's a communal way that's modeled. And then I also think there's a physiological way of, like, I always talk about this with Haven, like, it doesn't necessarily, this is not a hard, fast rule, but men tend to be much better at physically expressing emotion. Women tend to be better at emotionally expressing their
Yeah.
emotion. So they're good at sitting down and talking about it. Men, not always. I don't want to just lump everyone,
Well, I
but
feel
men
like that's
typically
like
are shit at that.
testosterone versus
Yeah.
estrogen. It's like
But also there needs to be
Yeah.
a balance of those. Like when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, it's like you can technically have both of those.
we
It's
all
just
have both of those,
it's a
right?
type of energy that you're expressing.
Mhm.
It's a way that we look at it. But I think it would put us in such a better place if you would give yourself the ability. Like a lot of times when I talk to, because you're talking about, like, I do tend to work with more women than men. And when we dive into these things and when we dive into past traumas and their relationships with certain things, women, in my experience, tend to have a harder time. Like we've talked about this too in previous episodes with you, of like that monster that you feel, that like feeling that you
Mhm.
get when you're a mom and you're like, I have these things and like these
The
emotions
mom rage.
that come up inside of me and I'm not quite sure how to feel them. And I'm like, I just don't think most women a lot of times are used to expressing themselves physically in that
Right.
way. And maybe that's on us as a society, because it's like, you are a woman, so because of you, this is what your life looks like, and you express yourself.
It's a lot of conditioning,
Yeah,
right?
it's like you're the
lady does
stay-at-home mom
this,
and
or
do
a
all
woman
this,
does
and the
this.
husband is
Mhm.
the you do this. So I've always had the idea of, I heard this one time, it was a long time ago at church, and the pastor was like, one of the reasons that we have a lot of issues within marriage and within family is women are told that they should be able to do all the things that they need to do, and they should look like their family should look like it's perfect, and it should look like they are not doing anything at all to actually achieve that. So they should have perfection within their household, the way that people view them, their social media pages, and the way that people look at their family and their house and their cars and their job should look like everything is perfect. Your kids are perfect. You make them these perfect lunches with the little, we don't use plastic. I use the metal ones, and I make little ladybug things. And then there's parents that are like, man, I'm over here. I ain't got time to do shit except throw a
Here's a
damn,
Lunchable.
Lunchable or an Uncrustable in a bag and do all this. And it's like, we live in this like comparison society that we do this to ourselves, but we all are technically sitting there going, well, it looks like you've got it all together. And then when we drop those walls and talk about it, it's like, oh shit, I didn't know you had all this stuff going on. So women, it's like, you should look perfect, but like you aren't even working at it. Like it just happened.
Mhm.
And men, your only value is in the money that you can provide for your family and the lifestyle that you can build for them, your presence in your family, your connection to your wife, your connection to your kids, your presence actually in their life and in the moments where they're playing and learning and developing is not needed. You're a wallet and a money factory for your family so that they can enjoy the things that they want to be able to do. And that is your sole role.
Mm.
And it's not that it's a bad, like, if you want to be a provider, if you want to be the one who takes care of your family, I'm not trying to shame that. I think when the mindset is that's all that you do, and when we distract ourselves with that, you're like, well, then I'll just work harder. But then you're going to come home and you're going to be like, I don't feel appreciated,
Mhm.
because we've set a metric where the appreciation can only be based on what it is that you're doing, when you would probably say, but I don't feel your presence in our household. I feel like I'm trying to,
Everybody's just disconnected, right?
yeah, like I'm over here trying to keep the household and clean the things and
Yeah.
make sure the kids are fine and do laundry and do all this stuff. And it's like, I think we've fallen into these, like, here's your role and here's my role. Let's just try not to bump into each other or cause any problems and like be okay. Versus like, some days we're going to have to get in the shit a little bit, and that's okay. Like, not every day is unicorns and rainbows within a situation. Some days are tough, and it's what makes me happy and grateful for the days that we have. Like Wednesday for me, to give you guys a little behind the scenes, we were supposed to record a podcast. Alex was, it was the first day of George's school,
Mhm.
and it was weighing on you a lot. And I could, even when you would message us, I'm like, don't ever have to apologize for, like, I thought I could not be there for her first day of school, but I can't. I've got to be there. I'm like,
How
dude.
dare you, Alex?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm like, and
I know you two
it's
are
'cause I-
so gracious.
it's because I know how and I can relate, because I'm like, oh, I will move things in order to be there for things for my kids, because for me
Mhm.
that's important. Like,
Yep.
when I went through all this stuff, I was like, oh, there's so many things that matter so much more to me than just working myself to the ground
Yeah.
all the time or missing out on those experiences. Like, first of things, you have to realize, like, everybody's like, but they're not going to remember. It's like, but I'm building memories
But
for me.
I remember.
Yes.
And I would argue that they do remember, because
Well, I
the
think this might be where you're setting up these systems, like these
Mhm.
coping mechanisms and these feelings that we're having when
Exactly.
you're younger
Exactly.
is, where was the presence there and what was modeled for me? Like,
This.
emotional
Yes.
maturity
This is
was
exactly what I was gonna go
never
into.
modeled for me.
Me
And I
either.
realized, I was like, oh, okay. And my wife, we've realized this, and oh, man, we might be able to get into this in an episode. I'll have to talk to you off episode about some family stuff that was really fun, that I was like,
So fun.
well, it's when you've done this type of work and you start to be aware, it's like you see these
Yeah.
things and it's like, that is not a healthy way of having a discussion. And when your family does it to you, I'm just like, I literally was like about to cut strings and just like, and I'm okay with that, because this is what we have to do for us.
Mhm.
Like, it was very close to that being a situation. And maybe we'll get into it. The people that I would talk about, I don't know if they would ever even listen to the episode. So typically I'm okay with that. but I don't want to offend or upset
Yeah.
anyone in that situation.
I know what you mean though about having, like what you were saying, what you were alluding to is having emotional regulation and maturity modeled. And I think that's where so much of this anxiety comes from. People that are kind of predispositioned to deal with anxiety, because essentially we're talking about it as an alarm, right? What it is, anxiety is just you're worried. You're worried about everything, about the future. You're in a constant state of, is this something that is going to hurt me? Is this something that's gonna hurt my family? Is this when the world's gonna come crashing down? Is this gonna be it? Oh my gosh, well, I need to make a plan F, G, all the way to Z, right? Because
But how many times did you feel like that when you were a kid? Like, I try to think back to things, and I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this like thing at the time that was my entire world was almost minuscule and nothing. But based on my life experiences and what I've gone through, oh my gosh, that was everything. Everyone saw that
Yeah.
happen today. This is what happened, or everyone found out that I did this, or like I grew up in a very small town. Everyone pretty much knows everything about everything.
Yeah.
So oh, this person did this, or because we used to pass notes back in the day, we didn't have phones to be able to text. So we had these
I
things where
still
we
have
would
a
write.
box of
Yeah,
notes
where we
that
would
are
write
in all the
notes.
fun little folds. Did you do the cool folds?
Uh-huh.
Not
Yeah,
just
you
the
had
football,
to.
not just
Yeah.
the football fold.
No.
Yeah.
You had to like tuck it in and
Yeah,
had
okay.
a pull
Okay.
thing.
Just making sure we're on the same page.
Oh, yeah. Come on. And it was like you'd learn a new way, and then everyone knew about this, and it was like you'd
We
literally
were like origami masters
oh,
when we were 13.
no wonder we're so creative. I'm biased towards like late millennials because I think
Yeah.
we're like a really interesting bunch of people that just have this like weird life that we got to grow up in. But you would have like a little triangle hanging out, and you'd like fold it all up, and then you'd be like open here.
Yes.
And it would have like a little
Yep,
thing.
a little arrow.
And you would have a note that was you and a friend, and it would just go back and forth, and you'd literally be walking in the hallway. Like we were like prison system. Like you're like walking through public school, and you're like here, and you like
Handshake.
slip each other
Right?
a
You
note,
grab the
and it's like
note.
cool. And then my problem was just me being me. Is like I would have a note that would be being passed between me and this girl, and then it was like the next day, it's like, well, that's not happening or something. But I can remember like who even knows what you would put in there? Probably super stupid stuff.
And nothing much, just chilling you.
Uh-huh.
What is
Hey,
the acronym?
sitting in Miss Wynn's class, can't believe that she's making us do this. Hey, did you talk to Alex? I can't believe that at lunch yesterday she said this, and then she had the audacity to ask me for my dessert when she had clearly already, like you would just have these ridiculous things. Like Haven found some the other day, and we read them, and it was
They're fun.
hilarious.
What
But
was
if somebody
what were you
found
talking
your
about?
notes,
Yeah.
it would like, oh my gosh, that's like
You're talking about the
devastating.
anxiety
Yeah, it's like the
regarding
anxiety
notes,
of that.
yeah.
And it's like, great, now everyone knows this. And it's like, well, if you look at now today's news media cycle, everyone's always like, oh,
It's
if
like-
something bad happens, just stay quiet. It'll go away. A new story
Mhm.
will come around, and that will happen. And that's true. But I think like I can honestly tell you that being emotional and crying was always modeled to me as a weakness when I was younger.
Yeah.
And now I see it as a strength when I'm older. Like there's times where I feel like I'll have emotion hit me, and I'll be like, you can't get emotional here where we're at right now with people around. And I'm just like, no, it's okay. I'm just going to let it happen. Like I'm
Yeah.
okay modeling that. Like I've had it happen at church. I've had it happen randomly. And I'm just like, it's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, just sometimes I lately have like, if it comes to me, I'm like, I just feel it then.
Well, I think you've done a lot of work, a lot of personal work to be just comfortable with yourself, and I think that it takes a lot of growth and a lot of practice to get to a place where you're comfortable doing something like that.
I will say the time that I remember it becoming most aware to me was my in-laws lost their dog that they've had since I've known them. His name was Bear. They lost him, and he had been like slowly declining and not doing well. And we were at the house, and her mom was getting ready to take Bear to the vet. And then I remember Remy sitting in the living room, and Haven goes back in the bedroom because she's like, my mom's calling, and she answers. And I hear Haven go, why? Like Haven starts crying, and she's like, why did you do that? And like literally it was just like, he's not doing well. Now's the time. Ended up putting him down. I'm like, I felt so bad for my mother-in-law. And just like I went in with Haven, and I had this like, hey, be strong for her because she needs that. And then Remy came around the corner walking into the bedroom, and I was like, I couldn't hold it together because I was like, she loves Bear so much, and I have to tell her that he's not with us anymore. And like that hit me in such a place where I was like, keep it together, keep it together. And then it was like, I can't. And it just ended up being this thing. And she was, you know, we ended up talking about it. And like, I don't know if she even understands, like, but we're trying to help explain and have that. But I never expected to have that moment
Yeah.
and have that be a situation. But it's like, you know, we're definitely not perfect. We have our moments where people lose their shit in our house. Like, I don't want this to sound like, let me talk to you guys about how I'm real good about the fact that I've done this work. It's like, no, I'm
face.
doing this work. Well, because that's how you feel sometimes is you're like, let me tell you
I
why
have
doing this
all
work is
the
important.
answers.
Because I'm cool and you're not. It's like, no, I want to try to be an example. So you could be like, oh, men like that exist. That can be modeled in a household. And it should be something that you're trying to actively work on with your partner and with your family. I feel like the popular thing right now is like, we're breaking generational curses. We're breaking these generational things. We're
Mhm.
doing those. But I think the way that we're telling ourselves that we're doing it is not it's another mechanism that we're creating that just goes, it's another disassociation where it's like, I just cut my family off and I disassociate from them. And in certain situations, that might be the best thing. And you might need to do that. But there also just might need to be really difficult conversations that instead of choosing to have a difficult conversation, you'd rather just push and press and hold that down. And you have to realize that I think you'll carry that with you literally for the length of time until you decide that you want to be able to let that go and have that discussion and whatever that thing is out that you're like, I could never say that to my mother. And I'm like, why can't you say that to your mother?
Yeah.
That's how that made you feel. I'm not sitting here either
We
trying
can-
to say
I
that you have to
think-
rip your parents apart.
Well, you can, yeah, there's like, you can wait for the context and the timing. And I would say just pray for the opportunity. That's what I
Ju-
think and do.
Just
right?
be
But-
open to it and know that these things are exhausting. They're not comfortable.
Well, that's a point I want to make too, just to switch gears a little bit into this is it anxiety or is it just icky feelings?
Hmm.
You know, is it just like you're uncomfortable with these feelings, or you have you have a limited capacity to deal with these feelings because it was never modeled for you. So it's almost just like a muscle, right? Like we haven't flexed our icky feelings muscle.
Mhm.
And so we
That's a good. We have not
we
flexed
have
our icky.
to exercise the icky feelings muscle so we can begin to identify, first of all, even identify what the emotions are, because I think a lot of times it'll show up, oh, I have anxiety, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, and those are all like super surface level emotions. Like if we get out the emotions wheel, right?
Let's get out the emotions wheel and let's understand that you're an onion and let's peel back the
Yeah,
layers. And
those
it's
are like top of the iceberg.
uh-huh.
Top, very top, right? So we got to go underneath the water because there's probably some like shame, humiliation, injustice, rejection, unfairness.
But you might not
like
know how to define it.
mistreatment,
Yeah.
suffering, like really intense things underneath that is actually a driving force for this. If you feel constantly like you're experiencing anxiety, like if you're an anxious person and that's how you perceive yourself to be, like you're just kind of an anxious person. Sometimes it is, we just didn't have emotional maturity modeled for us. We didn't have emotional regulation modeled for us. So we don't know how to handle conflicts. We don't know. We think we were just told to be happy all the time. Maybe we had a mom who just coddled the shit out of us and was like, oh, don't cry here. Do you want this? Do
Yeah,
you watch
and
TV?
so you're like-
It's okay. You're great. You're perfect. He needs a trophy. Shame, humiliation. there's my soundbite. Humiliation. Thanks,
No,
Garrett.
we needed the one from earlier when you went, oh. There was like a, oh. No, not Beavis and Butthead style. This is funny. So we actually watched this movie last night. Have you ever seen the movie Couples Retreat?
Mhm.
It's if you haven't seen it, it's basically this couple that's having trouble trying to conceive, and it's been tough on their marriage. And so they convince their friends that they want to go to this resort where they help them work on that, but they can't afford it unless they do this like group rate thing. So they all
Right.
go and they're like, you guys can do all the fun stuff and we'll only do the therapy like stuff. And then it's like,
But they can. They
they
all
can.
have to
It's
do
like,
it.
no, this is mandatory within being here. You have to do this. And so they're like, we're gonna leave. We want a refund. And then they stay the first night and they have a really good dinner. And they're like, you know what? Like, it's just talking about our feelings for a couple hours. How hard can it be? And then the next morning they
It's a
each have
funny
like these
movie.
different these
Mhm.
different therapists. And it's like, so like, tell me, and each one is like very specific, which I always love, to like their issues and what's going on. And
Right.
it's like, there's this one couple that like they're just holding it together for their kid till they leave the house, and then they want to get a divorce, and they just like, you could tell they have very polished answers. And the therapist goes, so tell me the last time you guys had sex. And they're just like, they have this look on their face of just like, oh
Deer
yeah,
in the
you guys are,
headlights.
are bumper cars just bumping around each other, but never, you're not connecting. We're like, we have
Mhm.
our armor
Your
up.
roommates.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
You're just hella really good roommates. It made me think of that immediately because you talk about it's the Jason Bateman and
Kristen
Kristen Bell.
Kristen Bell. Yeah.
It's their couple, which they're both like these like highly analytical. They
They're just
created
like
a
super
PowerPoint.
highly
Yeah.
functional, like analytical type people. So they're coming at this like it's a business problem they can solve,
Yeah, they're
right?
like, here's a PowerPoint, and so this is what we looked at, and we're in this relationship. They have like a PowerPoint,
And we're
and
gonna
they're
make
like,
a baby.
yeah, we've been in this relationship for 18 years, and if it's not going to work, we just don't want to waste each other's time, but we're trying to be smart about this because let's say that if we do get divorced, it's going to take 6 months to go through the 5 stages of grief.
Right.
Plus we have to go through
Oh,
6
gosh.
months of trying to find a new mate. Then we have to go through a year and a half before we're probably
Mhm.
married. Then we have to have 6 months potentially to conceive. And they're like, do you see how this can start to stack on itself? And I love it because Vince Vaughn's like, y'all really came from the heart on this one. I can tell. It's like y'all are really getting in your feels on this.
Uh-huh.
But in their first therapy session, he's like, they have the guy he's from The Hangover, and he's actually a medical doctor in real life, but he's become
Oh, Mr. Chow.
Yeah. So he's their one, and he's like they're describing how they're like they're very analytical in their answers, and he's like, stop telling me about how you, and just
Tell me the feelings.
yeah, and he goes, tell her how you feel, and he's like,
Yeah.
and he goes into it, and
I
he's like,
think
no, stop it.
yes.
And so he's like, I want you to describe it in one word, and it's so funny. Then they feel like that is this breakthrough, and he's like, angry. And she goes, judged. And he goes, and then the guy over there goes, good. And he's like, great. And she goes, relieved. And they have this whole thing of like, oh my gosh, we learned about other emotions and ways to express ourselves, and that this is
Isn't
okay.
it so wild?
And it makes us these new people. And it's like,
Oftentimes you'll ask Clay and I in couples therapy, like I'm sure people will be able to relate to this. Whenever we had to learn how you talk about your feelings, right?
oh yeah, you've talked about
And
this with Clay
and the
because this
feelings
is
wheel.
mhm.
Yes, so we pull out the feelings wheel. Clay knows the feelings wheel, and because his default is I'm frustrated or I'm annoyed, or I'm angry, and it's hard to discern like, well, why? Like what's
Right.
underneath that?
So you're trying to
yeah, and it often comes down to worry. Like I'm worried about this, or I have fear about this, right?
which a lot
so
of us have
trying
been programmed to feel over time.
Right. That fear. We're not. He grew up with a military dad, the only boy, 3 sisters, right? And so he's programmed like
Mm.
not to sit with any kind of feeling really at all. And so
Did they move a
anytime
lot?
they moved a little bit, yeah. His dad retired in the Air Force when he was younger, so they not too much, but I
I
mean,
could
yeah,
see
they
how
were
that
born.
could
Clay was
create like
born in
an
Guam.
underlying like feeling of how you feel this worry,
There's
and like
just
it'd be a
turbulence
default.
and
Yeah, because
chaos, right?
I don't feel like I have a base of like knowing where I'm going to stand on or what things are going to be
Mhm.
like, and if things are constantly in a state of change, like it's okay to want structure and to have certain things
Yeah.
there in order for you to feel like, oh, this is my blanket, and then I get my coffee, and then I have my things. And it's like,
Want certain things. Yes,
listen.
for sure. And he had a lot of like responsibility on his shoulders. And
Mhm.
so, point being, my point to this story is we had to learn anytime somebody would ask, like, how are you feeling? I feel like, or I think that, those are judgments and opinions. Those are not feelings.
Mhm.
Right?
Yep.
And so it's really common to describe
Which is
a
okay. Can we just make
context
it
or a
normal?
scenario or a circumstance. Like somebody say, "How are you feeling?" I feel like I'm just really exhausted right now. Not a not a
Uh-huh.
feeling.
And let's just
If
make
you had
this
just said
normal because
exhausted.
this is for a lot of us. Alex and I both dealt with this for our with our coach. Achieve something amazing. Cool. How did that feel?
Mm,
Good.
right. Not specific enough.
What do you mean good?
Yeah.
Like good is very generic and
Yeah.
it's just like think about how we answer things. Hey, good to see you. How are you? Good. Fine. Okay. I'm
Mhm.
good. I'm great.
Yeah.
Like
I'll
you
be
don't want to
happy. If I get this, I'll be happy.
Yeah. It's these like we've had that modeled for us. So of course you don't understand or
Mhm.
figure out or try to like I have to realize like it would be interesting to see we joked about having an episode where we bring our spouses in and maybe we'll do that if you guys are interested. But I think it would be so interesting to see and just like I love getting differing perspectives and sitting down and like taking all this in.
Mhm.
Part of it I'm grateful for is like I can sit in a room and be not talking all the time and take in a lot of things and like gather up stuff. And I realize it's from me growing up and I don't know where it comes from. I'm just hyper vigilant about being aware of where everyone's at and how they're feeling and what's going on. And Garrett's feeling good and Alex isn't like we've eased into the like I'm just always in every room typically
You're
pretty
reading the
good.
room.
Yeah, about doing that. That's not necessarily always a healthy way to be going into things about always worrying about everyone else and how they're feeling and what's going
Yep.
on. Like
That's called probably fawning
I'm
or fitting in.
I'm gonna
Go
die.
to our nervous system stress episode. That was a couple episodes ago.
Yes, so it's like our fight, flight,
That's a
freeze, fawn.
stress.
Like it's
a stress response, right? If we can enter into a room and we're trying to read it so that we don't stand out too
Mhm.
much, right? We're really good chameleons. I am one too.
Oh yeah,
That's how I survived.
I think
Huge
it's a
coping
3.
mechanism.
I think it's an Enneagram 3 thing in all honesty because you figure out
Yeah.
how to like it's I don't think it's necessarily like we don't need to attach like good behavior, bad behavior. It's just
No.
like this is a behavior. Sometimes I think there's strengths in it that you can use to your advantage and sometimes I think it can lead you to places where you just have to have an awareness. Like she doesn't listen, so it's going to be totally fine. Haven last night, she had gone to Trader Joe's and we love these cookie ice cream sandwiches that they have. So it's like 2 cookies with vanilla ice cream and then they roll the outside in like these chocolate chips. And so we were sitting on the couch watching stuff and she had gone up to get one for both of us. And she came back and she sat there and we're watching a show and I just like watched her in my peripheral and I watched her like look at them and then give me one. And I was like, and she took longer
took
than
the
she
better
realized.
one.
She took longer than she realized, and I called her out on it, and she died laughing. And I said, "Do you want to know what I do?" And she goes, "What?" She did not know this, and I said, "If I ever go get us one, I look at both of them and figure out which one I think you would like, and that's the one I give you." And literally, she was like, she's like, "I don't deserve you." And I'm like, I didn't say it to create that. I'm just like, oh, this is literally
This
me.
is
Like
funny.
I've been designed like this as a. Because let's be honest, people, I'm weird. Like I was an only child for 8
that's really
years.
sweet. I don't think there's anything wrong.
No, I
with
don't think
doing
there's
that.
anything wrong with that. I think that's a level where it could be leaned into something as good. I just am now really, really aware of like Alex and I have both talked about this. And I think for us, it comes from different places. My like trying to heal my inner child and work on things all comes from a place of like the reason I'm loud and talk a lot and I'm on social media and I'm all these things, like we've talked about it. I would take recognition over anything. So being recognized, being seen as the person of authority or whatever it is in a certain topic or a subject or in a thing, I would take that over a lot of money. I would take
Mhm.
that over like a lot of things that people would be like, "Oh my gosh, that is important to me." I'm like recognition or being like validated and seen in something for me is top priority. But that's because that's all I wanted when I was younger. Does it mean I didn't get it all the time? No.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's the situation. I also had parents that at the time were working hella hard to be able to take care of us and they both worked. And so I probably had some time where I was just on my own and without siblings and all these things. And then when siblings came along, it was like, oh, maybe you felt like you disappeared. Like, I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
not like necessarily diving into that. I just had a whole thing with Remy one day and I was like, oh, there's an ability that you can create and the wanting to be seen. And that's where that comes from. Like you talk about like in the feelings wheel, it's like I can get stressed out and upset and very angry. And if I really start to dig down in there, it's just like, I don't feel like I'm being seen or validated or noticed
Mm.
in what it is that I'm attempting to do here. So it's
That's
creating these
hugely
coping mechanisms
yeah,
for me.
and that's hugely important. I think like the crux of this episode is anxiety is an alarm to let you know your internal systems are blaring, going off, right? Like if we're constantly is anxiety in the acute form, meaning there's a very specific reason for it and you know it's going to go away. Like
Mhm.
you have to give a big work presentation or you're up for a
Oh,
job like a promotion, right? Or your job's under review or you have to go publicly speak or you're starting something new, right?
or you
Like
get that message, hey, can we talk? And you're like,
yeah, like an anxiety, it's the same mechanisms inside your body as excitement. Like
mhm.
I think that's really important to note here too. That's why there can be so many overlapping systems when patients come to us. Anxiety, y'all, beyond a shadow of a doubt, our patients all deal with anxiety because you can't have a chronic health issue, an invisible illness without having some form of anxiety. And that's because it's the same mechanisms, it's the same mechanisms in your body. It's the same pathways. And so,
We don't need to get upset with an alarm. Like
yeah,
it's exactly what you're talking about. You're not upset that a fire alarm is going off in your house. It's there. There's a reason that you put it in there. It's there
yes.
to protect you and keep you safe.
Mhm.
We don't get angry at that. We start to get angry at because it's going off all the time. And
It's
instead
going
of
off all the
addressing
time.
it, we're
Yes.
ignoring it or we're like,
Or we're trying to take something to just it's like
just take the batteries
my
out of it.
favorite yes, my favorite example is burning house, a fire alarm going off. You call the 911, firemen are there in a couple minutes. They break down your dorm, storm in, they knock the fire alarm off with an axe, and they're like, "You're welcome." And then they walk right out.
Yep.
But the fire's still going, right?
The problem is still
The
there.
problem is still there. We didn't actually take care of the problem. We just took care of the noise that was alerting us to a problem.
It's why I wanted to do this episode because as I saw again, all somebody has to give is a sentence. I'm like, oh, that's a great way of explaining that of like just changing your perspective of like, it's just an alarm. We wouldn't get upset with an alarm.
Yeah.
You don't get upset with a light on the dashboard of your car. It's showing you that there's a problem there. The issue is we tend to go with avoidance or ignorance towards some certain issues instead of dealing with them. I think this ties into your like quirks and little things episode that we did so much because
I
it's
love that title. That just was a download. Is it a personality quirk or is it just your trauma?
which by the way I think that's like one of our most second popular episodes. Like I think
Yeah.
as soon as you put that in the title, it was like, oh, that got people watching. Like that
Mhm.
video had more views on it. Um, I I want to explain this like from somebody else's perspective. Again, I told you guys the anxiety MD. You should follow that page. In doing like some research, I read this post and I'm like, like this should connect for people in a way because I feel like we've talked about and like gone on, a little journey here, but it's like the question that he posed in this post was, why does my anxiety get worse when things appear to be going well?
Mm,
Or why can't I relax?
mm.
Ever
Great
said that
question.
before? Ever
Mhm.
thought of like, why can't I just
Why can't
relax?
I
Why
just
can't I just,
relax? Yeah.
oh my gosh,
I liken this to I'm a very visual person, and so when I I can feel myself. A lot of my coping mechanism in this, just quick sidebar. We're gonna go right back to this.
Yep.
Is um I need to be busy, right? And I need to rush. And I grew up in a very rushed household. We were always doing something and so the how I visualize this is like one of those little chihuahua dogs, that's
Mhm.
like with the anxiety and they're breathing really fast and they're panting and the energy is just like lightning bolts coming off of them and they're probably like yip yapping.
That's your
Like
sound bite.
that's what is like happening inside my body when I am like I have the opportunity to just rest, but I feel like I need to be rushing. And sometimes I'll catch myself rushing for no reason. And it's the little busy chihuahua inside my body.
I've never related to anything more in my life because
Love it.
facts.
Keep going.
It's the exact same response for me. So we talked about it. That's the hustle thing of like, that's one of my triggers for me that I have to step back and recognize. And it's like when I start to get in that loop, it's like, where's this coming from and why am I feeling like that?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that there's not seasons where I'm working hard or doing more work or diving into something because I'm passionate about a project or something that I'm working on. But if I'm constantly doing that,
When you
and
can't
I'm not
rest.
feeling good,
When your busy chihuahua is busy when you're supposed to be like a sloth.
you're busy chihuahua. We need certain things where we like make
Busy
graphics on our social
chihuahua.
media, and it's like, have you been your Chester Chihuahua, or have you been your Sid the Sloth a little bit over here? Have we been like it's your feelings
Busy
triangle? Alex is
chihuahua
gonna be.
mode.
We're just sitting with people, and it's like, okay, so which one of these would you say you relate to more? And it's like this like little jittery dog that like yips at people all the time. That's like, yeah.
With the little fangs.
What a
the
great
little fangs
example.
bears. Okay, keep reading. I'm glad you related.
Okay. So we talked about like, why can't I relax? So it's because when you were young, things would go along without significant incident and then things would collapse.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you would feel okay and out of the blue, things would fall apart.
Sure.
So you just feel like, oh my gosh, this all fell apart. Your nervous system learned not to trust safety because that safety was always interrupted with trauma. So we've now noticed a cycle of like, oh, your body is now smart and keenly aware and is going, oh, now we literally have this loop that we're starting to create. So subconsciously I'm going, well, I can't trust safety because eventually the saying that we have, the other shoe's going to drop.
Together, fire together.
So we sit there
Mhm.
going, when's the other shoe going to drop? When am
Yeah.
I? And this creates certain things in us that aren't necessarily bad. Maybe you're someone who saves money all the time. If I dug into that with you, you'd be like, well,
there might be a lack of
yeah, it would be a
lack
scarcity.
issue or a scarcity
yeah,
issue.
it would be
Mhm.
the mindset of like, and most of us, by the way, when it comes around money, have this because I could say certain things like a penny saved is a penny.
Earned.
And everyone will start to do that. Money
Money
doesn't grow on trees. Like you have these things that we say, and
Money
it's
is
like
the root of all.
evil. Oh my gosh,
Right.
money. So it's
Mhm.
money is evil. People who are rich are terrible. They don't do great things for the world. Like money is a bad thing. Like
Mhm.
I should keep myself in a place of scarcity and lack because that stuff is evil and bad and not good. And
Sure.
so you have to realize that it's similar with these processes. We've created these mechanisms within us. It's like, this is how we look and view the world.
It makes me think like he was talking about how it was modeled, and that what comes up for me specifically too is like how often we would go somewhere, but it was never okay. Like we would go on vacation a couple times and we would never have the right room. We would end up having to switch rooms. Or we would go eat and like, this table's not okay. We need to switch to this table over here. Or, like that sort of environment
Yeah,
where even
nothing's good
now we
enough,
just
yeah.
nothing's good enough.
Mhm.
And so that how that plays out is really interesting. And if you like Brene Brown, she has this concept called foreboding joy. And she illustrates it in a story where she has this memory where she and her husband and her 2 kids are in the back seat and they're just driving, listening to music. Her young son actually told a really funny joke and they're all laughing. And she immediately looks at her husband and says, slow down, and mad. And the whole car looked and they were stopped.
Change the whole energy.
They were stopped at a red light. They weren't even going.
Oh.
And she is exactly what this is talking about. She had this moment where, think about a movie where the music is playing, they have the wind whipping in their hair and they're driving.
This is how
and
every scary
everybody's
movie
happy,
trailer
and then
starts.
there's going to be a car accident.
This is how every
Right?
scary movie starts, and you're like, don't jump, here it comes.
Yeah.
You know it's coming.
Yep,
It's
and
too
you know
good to be
it's coming.
true.
And that's, when's the other shoe going to drop? Oh my gosh, right? And how that is so baked into our physiology. And anxiety is an alarm, right? If we're having these incidents like this, or we're in this perpetual state of anxiety, it's our response. It's not our fault that we're dealing with a lot of this, but it is our responsibility to grow and heal. It is our responsibility to figure out what we need to do in order to get out of this constant cycle. Because the fact of the matter is, if we're experiencing this and our physiology is doing something, our internal processes aren't working optimally the way that they're supposed to, and will inevitably lead to stress management issues, chronic stress management issues, which leads to all sorts of other things like hormone disruption, right? I said that weird hormone disruption,
Whoa.
hormone disruption, or migraines, headaches, pain,
Mhm.
all autoimmune stuff, like all sorts of things, all sorts of systems in our body because it doesn't work in a vacuum. Everything, all our systems affect
You mean
the
my body might
quality.
attack itself because I attack myself?
Whoa, that's some quantum healing
I
shit
mean,
right
yeah,
there.
you can get into some stuff. And if you're in a journey on this or trying to start or going, like, give yourself some grace. Like, this isn't
Yeah.
perfect. It doesn't just
It's
change
never
like
perfect.
this.
We're
It,
never going to arrive,
yeah,
right?
it's a journey. It's not a destination. We don't really get there. You get closer and you like where you're at. Like, oh my gosh, I so much needed that in my life in order to be. And I'm like, I'm not there, but I'm so much in a better place where I don't know how this could have potentially started to affect my marriage or been something that created a problem versus now I'm like, okay, we are far from perfect, but man, I'm so glad that we've
You're on
now
your
developed
way.
skills,
Yeah,
but you don't realize like what you've picked up along the way are tools now that you have
Totally.
that can be implemented to go, oh, I know now how to at least manage this or what can be done. Or hey, when you said that, this is why I started to respond that way. Like all you've done is go alarm, and now the alarm created awareness, and you go, thank you, and you shut it off, and
You can shut it off yourself.
and you went to the issue. It was like
Yeah.
the thing that they said was the alarm, but you now had the awareness of like, okay, so when you said that, this is what I heard and this is what I felt. And then you're going to go, but that's not even what I said. It was my perception of what you said.
Right. It was my
and how I
story
perceived
around it.
Correct. And maybe they did and maybe they didn't. But obviously, we'll get through
We'll
this.
land the plane.
As a result, your nervous system, I'm going back to the topic that we were talking about. As a result, your nervous system learned to stay vigilant and not trust safety. You learned it was safer to stay in a constant state of readiness and alarm. Your body taught itself that it wasn't safe to feel safe. And as a result, the alarm became bigger and bigger, and it started to basically become a part of you. And when things are going well in your life now, some part of the child inside of you always is waiting for the other shoe to drop. That's literally how they describe it. As that alarm took hold of your system, the mind, especially the analytical left hemisphere, needs something definitive to worry about 24/7.
Right.
So we just find a thing.
Your mind is going to come up with a reason to match your physiology. So if your body feels super stressed out, your mind is going to make that a reality, right? Because our mind doesn't perceive reality from
Yep.
what we
You
make
can't
up.
separate them.
It doesn't. Yeah,
It-
that's not how that.
To you, it's real.
To you, it's real.
Yep.
Yes, whether it's real or not. In your mind, it's real. So then your mind has to create a justification for what your body is actually feeling.
Mhm. It says this is why your nervous system doesn't feel safe feeling safe. Like it does not
Oh.
feel safe feeling safe.
Right.
And it's
This is why you can't rest.
yeah, he's like, this is a devastating complication of childhood trauma. And all the cognitive therapy in the world will not fix this old imprint.
No, because it's
So,
a somatic issue. It's a mind-body
It is
issue.
a connection issue. And that's why I feel like a lot of talk therapists are moving into EMDR and
Mhm.
doing
Breath work.
somatic therapy. Like I'm trying to find somebody that does some of that stuff and even learning some myself. Cause like I've watched people go through that in my office and I had no idea what I was experiencing and what was going on. And then I was like, oh,
Mhm.
that's what was happening. That was a release that we created. That was this, when we say somatic, it's like that gut feeling. So when
Somatic
we're talking about,
just has to do with
yeah,
your body. So like breath work,
Yep.
yoga, tai chi.
it's like that
things that
internal
engage.
connection to that. It's like actually that connection. It's like you talk about that was a visceral somatic response. It's like I felt that in my, like the feeling that you get inside from whatever that was, like
Mhm.
watching a certain scene in a movie or something happening. Wherever you start to feel that in your body, that's that somatic feeling
Mhm.
that no matter how much we can talk and talk and talk about this until we're blue in the face. And I have no issue with you talking to someone. Please do. But also
In
know
order
that that
to fully
person's,
heal, we have to have a body element.
if you do not feel it, you will never heal it. You have to feel it, which is the shittiest part. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't feel good. It leads to anger and tears and holes in walls and broken shit. Like it does happen that way, but there's a way to
It
do that.
can.
It can.
Mhm. Doesn't
the way
have
I've
to.
had people describe it to me,
Yeah.
women, when they're working through it and they start bringing these things up and they do like bioenergetic exercises that
Mhm.
force them to start bringing these emotions to the surface and moving them and expressing them. That's the stuff that comes out. And so the first time I ever did one of my challenges, this was one of the things that I dove into as like a topic, not knowing the impact it would have. And that was like day 3 of one of my first challenges ever. And everyone the next day, like the feedback was like, holy shit, I didn't even know that was possible. Like I went and did that stuff. I started doing all this. One of them was like, I broke a plate. One of them was like, oh my gosh, I like had this whole fit of like all these things coming out. And I think the thing that should give you light at the end of the tunnel is how you can feel immediately after really allowing yourself to feel that.
Mhm.
There is such a freedom and relief that comes on the other side of that that should empower you of like, oh my gosh, I can do this, because I don't want us to just have this episode and it's like, cool, anxiety is alarm. I'll just be aware of that. Like I want you to be willing.
We have to put out the fire.
Yeah. First of all, we can put out the fire, but the first thing I want you to do is just take the name tag off.
Mm.
You feel feelings of anxiousness. You are not anxiety.
Yep.
You are not migraine. You are not these things. You don't have to have a label. I'm aware it gets you seen at least. So you're like, well, at least someone can see and understand what it is that's going on. Because if you're not sure what you've been feeling or why you feel this way or why you have an invisible illness or why you're ignored by doctors and all this stuff, it's because they're looking to triage your situation. What gets you out of pain the fastest? There ain't jack shit that somebody's going to be able to give you to take that's going to get you out of a somatic feeling response that you are having inside of your body.
Mm,
It's just not
right.
going to happen. And when that starts to happen over and over with long periods of time of programming ourselves to act like this is where Alex always talks about and has her little, this is why you can feel autoimmune issues. This is why you can have
Mhm.
migraine. This is why you can have fibromyalgia. This is why you can have certain pain disorders that are going on inside of the body, because your body has taken feelings and emotions and energies and all these things and
We've
compressed them down.
compounded the problem.
Yeah. And they're just there. Like, Your Body Keeps the Score is one of my favorite books. I recommend that for people all the time, of like understanding that whether you think your body, even if you just went through that traumatic experience in your mind, your system still experienced that. If we hooked you up to something and like watched what happened as you were going through that, we would be able to see energy, your brain lighting up and certain responses coming on and certain things being activated and your sweat going up and your hair standing on its end and you breathing heavier. Like, even if you never went through that,
Mhm.
and you just start to have these responses over and over and over again. And it's like, hey, it's okay to remove those connections and remove those ties and to start working on that. But I typically recommend like do it with someone, have someone that you're starting to work with, and also just give yourself the space in order to feel your feels.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like it's going to come on, it's going to be a thing. Like I would love to see one of those, because I think I could also be horrible at this too, of just like describing certain things in like in a way that makes sense.
Mm.
Like you said, of just like just feel frustrated. And it's like, okay, well, let's look at I could just see this whole thing of
have
like
the wheel.
it just taking it a little bit further of like it would help you to have a better understanding of this is why I feel this way. This is why this is a thing. And it's like,
There's your
okay.
Feelings wheel.
Oh,
We should do an episode on the feelings wheel.
we should.
For now, we'll wrap this one up.
We'll try to put this up so you can. It's called the emotional sensation wheel. That's
It's literally the feelings wheel. You can
Okay.
just Google it.
and it'll come up like this.
Yeah. Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This
So
is
feelings
if you
wheel-
ever wanted to know Alex's brain, this is Alex's brain,
I'll
literally
send this
laid
to
out
Garrett
for you.
and he can put it in the YouTube episode.
This is
so you can see the photo.
This is such an
But-
Alex. Oh my goodness. Just in knowing you and knowing the things I've watched you make and create on social media, I'm like, this is her. It's like perfectly color coordinated. It's like, here's your base feelings. Then here's things that can come from that. And then here's, God, this is fantastic.
I know,
Like
right?
anger. Well, where's that coming from? Well, I'm hurt.
Or are you insecure or hateful? Are you hateful or are you, and then it's the physical sensations, right?
Mhm.
I'm flushed. I'm using loud words. My heart's racing. I'm clenching. I feel numb. I'm
Interesting.
hot,
Look
right?
so this is, I feel like anger is one of the ones that we have the hardest thing with, because I feel like anger gets this bad connotation of like, why would you ever be angry? So anger, I love, goes out to hurt, insecure, hateful, mad, aggressive, irritated, distant, or critical. Then some of the things that go out further: gut turning, feeling hot, headache, numb, tight jaw, clenching, racing, flushed, loud words, turning away, scowl, hiding. Like, these are a lot of the
Right.
ways I hear some of my, because we talked about how men deal with this and how women deal with this and how you can have that feeling. I'm like, this is what I hear a lot of. And it's like, I don't even know how we do it. Haven talked about the other day, there's like those rooms that you can like,
Smash rooms.
yeah, smash rooms. I'm like,
Break some
maybe that just
stuff.
needs to be a thing. We just need a
Yes.
relationship with a smash room place. And it's like, just go here and see how you feel once you've done this stuff. Oh, I thought you were like trying to do something. I was like, is Garrett? He's like, we have a caller on the line. Alex's phone is connected to the thing over here. It's like, what is happening?
I was waiting for a moment that was going to be perfect to use the soundboard again.
Maybe we'll give it to you. Yeah. So feelings wheel, they're all a little bit different. But that's what it is. It helps us identify what that alarm is, what that alarm's telling us, what the anxiety is telling us. And we can't change what we don't measure and are not aware of. And so, like Brandon said, you're not a person with anxiety, you're a person experiencing anxiety.
Yep.
It's not you.
You're feeling
you're
feelings
human.
of anxiousness.
You're a human that's having a human experience, and feelings, icky feelings, are absolutely a part of that experience, and therefore must be experienced. Otherwise it keeps us sick.
How many times can you say experience in one sentence?
More than that, but I'm not gonna try.
It leaves you with the ick.
That's
Anyways.
it. It leaves you with the wick. That's what we got.
Ooh, icks. Yep. We could do an episode on icks. That'd be fun too. All right. That's what we got. You got an eye open, so you got to tell them what to do.
So if you find this super helpful or it makes you think of somebody that you know, make sure you send it to them. If you could.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Share, like, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Leave us a review. You can reach us at youcrackmeuppodcast.com.
But soon it'll be something else.
Yeah, we're going to have a phone number for y'all here pretty soon. But let us know, what you want us to talk about. As always, we are happy to oblige. Thanks for listening.
Love you. Bye.